This is the moment we've all been waiting for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world. Let's get ready to rumble!
Welcome to In or Out, a rapid-fire game where we discuss a handful of NBA topics and determine where we stand. Joining me today to discuss the core four of the Cleveland Cavaliers, we have Corey Walsh and Mack Perry. Thank you guys for joining me on the front lines today to push the Cavs agenda.
Thank you, Tony, for letting me and Mack have a reunion show, and you could just be a part of it.
Yeah. Oh man, it's always good to link back up, honestly, and just push the general agenda of this team, because there's just so many differing opinions right now, depending upon whatever subject you want to apply. It's getting crazy.
It's always good to have the boys back in town. I hope I can say that about the Cavs sometime soon, because it has been a rough season, especially for the core four. They've appeared in just 25 games together this season. That's like half of what they played last year. I don't think they've had the entire group healthy for more than a handful of games this year. Even when they are on the court together, someone's banged up. All of this on top of some individual slumps has led to some serious growing pains for the core four. It's important to remember that last season, that four-man lineup had the sixth best net rating in the league. That has not been replicated this year. And so while we will discuss the longevity of the core four all summer, I'm sure of it, today I want to focus on one topic for each individual member of the core. And let's start off with the most pressing concern that I think we all share. Donovan Mitchell is playing through what appears to be a knee injury that isn't going away anytime soon. So, Mack, I'll start off with you. Are you in or out on Mitchell still being able to lead a serious playoff run, even with this injury in play?
I'm in, only because I have to be. I mean, it was encouraging to see him in the second half of that Phoenix game look a little bit more explosive, but you can clearly tell that knee is still bothering him. The PRP injection did not help. I mean, you can clearly tell the effects of that knee injury have been sustained, and he's been carrying a large load all season, really dating back to last year. I mean, he was the focal point of the offense. He still is the focal point of the offense. I guess my reservation is with other members of this core who are going to be discussed later on struggling as well. When playoff basketball starts and the defensive attention is heavily geared towards Donovan and they're blitzing him and they're asking everybody else to step up, that is my fear. I mean, Donovan, he has been really, really strong and tough out there and just trying to push through this injury. But there does come a point where, you know, it might be a little bit too much to handle, a little bit too much to have carrying on his back. And so I'm in, but just because I kind of have to be right now. I'm not sold on the rest of the season like some fans are.
Yeah, and especially in the playoffs when it kind of does, it comes down to just having the best player on the floor sometimes. If the Cavs don't have their best guy 100% available, that's a reason to be concerned. Corey, are you in or out on this?
I'm out on Donovan Mitchell leading a run, because you can't, the ironic part of this is in the question. He can barely run in the first place. The dude is like hobbling around. Like, it's like I feel like if you didn't know the injury, you'd still notice it. But I feel like as fans and as people who try to like analytically view the game, you could just, you're like hyper focusing on every movement this guy's doing. And it's clear that what he's playing at is not near 100%. But the fact of the matter is, when it comes to this Cavs team right now, Donovan Mitchell, let's call it 70%, is better than any other player on this roster as is. And that's not a slight to them. It's just a testament to how great of a player Donovan Mitchell is. But you're taking what makes him so dynamic. And I think we all know he's like a great three-point shooter. And it's turning into the Darius Garland thing, kind of, where the injuries have kind of taken his game and simplified it down to a few, like, to just three things he relies on. And Mitchell's explosive athleticism is gone pretty much. So now it's like, can he get around with finesse? But finesse is also tied to probably being healthy and your ligaments operating at 100%. And it's hard to be Donovan Mitchell pulling Donovan Mitchell type moments off when you can just tell he's hampered by this injury. So if the team is underperforming and Donovan Mitchell is expected to bail the team out at 70% in the postseason, it's going to be extremely tough for this Cavaliers team to get any sort of momentum whatsoever.
it's really, he's relying a lot on his jump shot right now, just out of necessity, because he can't get to the rim. In the weeks before this injury, so before the All-Star break, he was averaging over 30 points per game. Since returning from the knee injury, he's around 15 points per game. That's not great. His athleticism clearly looks limited. I would say I'm tentatively in, just trying to be optimistic here, because he's still an incredible shot maker. We saw that in the Phoenix game. Even with how limited he was, he almost led that comeback in the third quarter there. His playmaking has really stood out all season. I think if he's still able to draw any defensive attention, even just above the break, his ability to make the right read and get rid of the ball faster than we've seen in previous seasons could help. And if I'm trying to be optimistic about the knee injury, now, of course, none of us know exactly what's going on with his knee. None of us are doctors. But from Mitchell himself, he has said that it's something that gets better with time. Clearly, it will only fully heal until he rests, which he doesn't have time to do. But he has said there's no structural damage. He said it won't get worse by playing on it. And the Phoenix game is really interesting because on one hand, he clearly looked like he was hobbled on one leg. But we also saw a little bit of that burst that we didn't see in the other games. Like there was a couple plays where he was able to get downhill, change directions, deaccelerate. And so I have no idea if that's a positive sign or if he was just really pushing himself in that game for some reason. But I do think we've seen a little bit of progress in that department, if that makes sense.
I would almost, yeah.
Go
I
ahead,
almost
Corey.
wonder if the Cavs' smartest route would just be to let Donovan sit for these next 5, because I think it honestly, at this rate, if this is the Donovan Mitchell we're going to get, it doesn't matter who we're going to play in the first round. It's just this team is going to be so hampered, and you're forcing your best player to play hobbled. If you could try to get Donovan Mitchell as close to 100% as he could get off this knee, which doesn't seem like it's possible. It's just too short an amount of time. But just getting him as healthy as possible for the postseason gives this team the best chance to win versus kind of put the round block in the square hole and just hope that this kind of fixes itself by forcing the issue.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I've seen a lot of people suggest that, honestly. I mean, you have LA, Memphis, Indiana, Hornets. And we would think, at least in seasons past or really even earlier on in the season, that the Cavs still have enough talent, sans Donovan Mitchell, to get the job done on at least two of these remaining 5. But that just has not been the case. You just do not know which Cavaliers team you're going to get from game to game. They have been that inconsistent this year. And some of those games include Donovan Mitchell. I mean, since he's returned, he's just shooting 25% from 3-point distance. And to Tony's point, he has become a little bit over reliant on that jump shot just because the lack of explosiveness. Now, like I commented on earlier on, it was nice to see him come out in the second half of that Phoenix game and just kind of try and push through it. But honestly, Tony, I think that's what it is. I think it's controlled, right? He is trying to limit his drives to the basket, limit his exposure to more injury out there, and just be a little bit more calculated with how he is choosing to attack the basket. And if it makes sense, if it's going to help the Cavs in the long run, I'm all for sitting him these last couple of games. But the trade-off to doing that is, not having your full starting 5 together. What we've seen all season is chemistry concerns, a lack of rhythm. There are a lot of different things that go into that, and I think that's kind of the trade-off. So while I would prefer Donovan Mitchell come into the postseason healthy, I just don't think we can afford to have him sit. I mean, I get like the matchups. It is totally matchup dependent. I know we were just talking about, I think before we went live here, not seeing a team like Miami possibly in the in a 7-game series, but I don't know. It's a toss up. It sucks that we've gotten to this point.
Yeah, it's when your best player gets injured, you really hope that the rest of the core would have stepped in and helped. And up to this point, it just hasn't been the amount of help or the amount of production that you would need to avoid kind of this backslide we've seen. One guy who could provide that help and who has been playing well recently is Evan Mobley. Mobley's having one of the best offensive stretches of his career. He's knocking down 3-pointers. He scored 20 plus in 4 straight games, and he's creating plays for others, passing the ball. And so, Corey, we'll start with you this time. Are you in or out on giving Mobley more touches down the stretch of the season?
I think it only benefits the team to kind of give Mobley this boost, because if he's playing well, you might as well reward it. And in the sense that, let's say Mitchell in a playoff series does decide to dial it up, like Max said, maybe he's holding himself back a little. I feel like Donovan Mitchell in the postseason isn't going to do that. I feel like he's a player that's just going to give his best and go all out night to night. You need to have someone that, in case the worst happens, your team can kind of alter the way it's going to play around somebody else. And the way that this Cavs team has been playing lately, even though they've been playing poorly in this stretch, Evan Mobley has been from the last probably the last player you would complain about in the stretch. Maybe Jarrett Allen would also be up there as well. But Mobley is a type of player that this team is supposed to kind of be building around. And I think that's something we're forgetting, just as Donovan Mitchell is obviously the epicenter of the Cavaliers right now. But ideally, the two of them are what the team wants to kind of use as the building blocks going forward. And if you want Mobley to take a leap, the only way you're going to do that is by giving him the proper touches necessary. And if it corresponds also with winning, then it's not a bad proposition whatsoever.
I was gonna say, I think that when you look at what Mobley has been able to do, the biggest thing that stands out to me, obviously everybody's loving the 3-point shot, right? That's the biggest thing that people are pointing to. He's taken 2 per game over his last 5 or so, and he's making 60% of those, ladies and gentlemen. So I guess you can call him a 3-point threat, no matter if people are defending him or not. But the thing that I have loved to see from him over this recent stretch has been the aggression. Right. The willingness and just the pure want to take shots out there and drive inside, put his shoulders into people, just invite contact. We've seen that over this stretch. And I don't know if we've seen that for a sustained period of time from Evan Mobley for a very long while, if ever, honestly. So I think it just as Corey said, I'm totally in on that, because it can only benefit the team, not only for this year, but in, the years to come, to see his furthered offensive development. That's what we all want. And I know a lot of people, there's so much talk about Evan Mobley has regressed. And if you really watch the game this year, that could not be further from the truth. He may not have taken that proverbial leap that we all want him to, but he has definitely added to his game, and he has developed in specific categories. And so I think giving him more opportunities to touch the basket, to touch the ball, and to put up more shots, that can only be beneficial, especially when it comes to floor spacing, because him having that confidence to go out there, similar to how we've talked in the past about Dean Wade having the confidence to pull the trigger from the power forward position, or Okoro for that matter, those guys, having the confidence just to do that is very beneficial. So I'm totally in on Mobley receiving more touches.
Yeah, I'm in as well. And I think the idea that he's regressed is silly to me. You haven't seen that leap that people might have asked for, but he has clearly refined so many aspects of his game. He's polishing certain things, whether it be improving as a jump shooter or adding that muscle in the offseason. I think you can see a clear difference in the way he absorbs contact, especially during this recent stretch. He's kind of throwing his shoulder into people and getting to the rim. And to quote our buddy Jackson Flickinger, they're letting him look like a basketball player. He's breaking free from just being stuck in the dunker spot, or kind of robotically operating these dribble handoffs and pick and rolls. Like, they're letting him touch the ball and dribble and look for his own shot and face up and do things that a basketball player should do, rather than basically being a robot out there. And it's important for him to continue building confidence, especially if this is going to be the version of Donovan Mitchell we get in the playoffs. You're going to need Mobley to get a couple, we have a week and a half, 2 weeks to the playoffs. Like, let him build some reps here, build some confidence before we get to the playoffs, and he might be playing a larger role than you expected. Now, you don't need him to be your best scorer, but he's going to have to play some sort of role, and you might as well get ahead of the curve on it.
Yeah, and if we're going back to the leap thing, like, I feel like you could argue that he maybe showed signs of stagnating in the first half of the year, but post-injury, I feel like Mobley has been a completely different player than any other version of Mobley we've really seen with this Cavaliers team. So, like, as Mack and you have both pointed out, Tony, that Mobley's aggression has just been dialed up to another level. It feels like a more grandiose version of the Okoro we've seen this year, where for past few seasons, his biggest thing we always said was the dude has the tools. The matter of the fact is he just doesn't show confidence, and we don't know whether it's just the way he's schemed within the offense or not. But ever since Mobley's come back, I feel like it's a combination probably of they're trying to feature him more in the offense as bodies are withering away on this Cavaliers roster, and also the fact that they just want their young player to finally like feel like he's a bigger part of the offense. He's graduated from glorified role player school to finally be like, all right, let's see like what kind of star qualities you have, because at USC he single-handedly dominated games on both sides.
Corey, you can't tell me that somebody didn't sit his ass down, prior to coming back and say, dude, you gotta show more aggression. You have all the talent potential in the world, but potential means nothing if you're not using it or trying to hone it. And for him, it's starting. The work that he's put in is starting to show. It's similar to Isaac Okoro when we talk about this confidence and aggressiveness thing. But it has been a sight to see for him. I just hope he can continue it, especially down the stretch here.
And also, leaps are so hard for Mobley in the sense of defensively, because it's hard to take leaps when you're already near the top from the moment you're drafted. Yeah. But everyone, it's an offense-driven league, so no one really views leaps in terms of defensive play, even though Mobley has already, like, even just gradually has taken leaps to an elite all NBA defensive player of the year level every year. But everyone's always like, oh, well, if he doesn't knock down threes at like a reliable rate, then he just sucks overall and just ignores it entirely. If you're not Brooke Lopez, you're just not good.
Yeah. And I said this on my last episode here, but like, even if, let's say, Mobley stagnates and doesn't get any better for the rest of his career, you're looking at a defensive player of the year candidate every year when he's healthy, a guy who can score 20 points on any given night, and he's a good rebounder. That's pretty damn good to me. And that's if he doesn't get any better at 22 years old. So the ceiling is still very high. Who knows how much higher he's able to climb with this Cavs core. But anyone pretending that we haven't seen signs or that Mobley is somehow not a promising prospect anymore, which unfortunately you've seen people say, I think that's just wild.
If you like pause his career right now, your at worst comp for his player profile going forward is like a more offensively gifted Rudy Gobert. And that is a fine floor because obviously teams valued that as Minnesota threw like 5 first-round picks at Rudy Gobert. So we have a pretty good asset on our hands regardless.
I guess my question would be, and I don't want to veer too off topic. I know you got topics lined up here, but I will ask, if this is the version that we get of Evan Mobley for years to come, is this still worth paying a eventual max to? Would you still make that offer to him, keep him in town?
See, I think you kind of have to. I know that people don't like to hear that, but it's kind of the situation. Like, what other option does Cleveland have? Are you going to let this talent walk? Because at the end of the day, and I'll even admit it myself, I don't know what type of player Mobley will end up being. No one does. You're betting on their potential at that point. And I think when you're a franchise like the Cavs, where how often do you get a player with the amount of potential that Evan Mobley has? What are you going to let him walk for? What would be the purpose there? You're going to save a little extra money somewhere. It's like, either he's the guy or you're going to be screwed for a little while. And that's just kind of the situation that smaller markets are in. And really the NBA at large is like, that's just the reality of the NBA. You got to bet on potential somewhere. And I would be surprised if they let him walk for any reason.
Yeah, it's an asset-driven league, and if a team like the Cavs can just stumble into an Evan Mobley type, you won't get an Evan Mobley type to come for like a decade plus unless the ping pong balls fall right. And that's what the Cavs got lucky with in this latest rebuild, is that even though maybe they didn't fall exactly where they wanted to, the players that fell to them at their time, they would never have acquired in other situations.
A lot of luck goes into it, right?
Definitely. Let's switch gears now and talk about Mobley's running mate in the front court. Jarrett Allen has had a fantastic season. I can't say enough about how valuable Allen has proven to be. But when it comes to all defensive consideration, is Allen going to get a nod? Can he beat out the rest of the competition and earn his first all-defensive selection? Where do you guys stand on this?
I'll let Corey handle that one first.
I don't think he's gonna get it, and I don't think that's really a slight towards Jarrett Allen. I feel like award season is probably one of the more like glorified things in the media because it just comes down to a popularity contest. I mean, how many times have we really heard the argument of the year that Marcus Smart won his defensive player of the year? There was like almost an outrage amongst like fans being like, I've watched Marcus Smart play against my team. Nothing really stood out to me. He was a good player. He should have made all defensive team, but his defensive player of the year was a little outlandish.
A little fraudulent.
And then it's just you have to go through the names of like centers in the league. And Jarrett Allen, for the most part, as he's well known, but I wouldn't say he's the first center that will get thrown out. Like I feel like there's still like other centers in the league. Like Draymond will probably get nods, even though he literally was suspended for being too dirty of a defensive player. And we just are sitting here like, in terms of statistics, yes, by every metric, Allen should be in consideration. He has impacted this Cavaliers defense and pretty much held it down for month-long stretches without a running mate by himself, being paired with George Niang, who by any measure is not a defensive stalwart whatsoever. So that's an accolade within itself. Sorry, Mack, I know you guys are boys. but yeah, no, I think Allen should get a nod, but unfortunately for him, I just don't think it's in the cards because I honestly, there was a period in time where I felt like Okoro could have made a push as well, but also that's just completely fizzled now that the team's defense has gone down the tubes.
I think, we watch these guys and we just get so enamored with what they bring to the table because they cover up so many of the weaknesses that we have in that kind of an unbalanced starting unit. If you want to throw Isaac Okoro in that conversation as well, I think we all believe that both of these guys deserve the consideration, but this is just such a deep and talented league with so many talented and really good defenders out there. And I just don't see a spot for either one of these guys. Jarrett Allen obviously has been probably one of the most important players on the roster this year, and definitely the best defender that we have outside of Evan Mobley in an injury-riddled season for him. But yeah, I find it hard for a center, especially in today's kind of positionless era, when they look at these teams, to find room for him. I just don't think it'll happen. It sucks because we keep getting robbed of these these postseason awards or regular season awards rather. But at the end of the day, we know how much he means to this team from a defensive standpoint, and I can live with him not getting the nod as long as people recognize that he is a real threat defensively.
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. I don't think he's going to end up getting it. You have Gobert, who's basically a lock for Defensive Player of the Year. I think even Victor Wembanyama will get on the defensive team over him. And then you have guys like Anthony Davis, Bam Adebayo, players who, again, that popularity contest type thing. Not to say that those aren't great defenders, but when it comes to reputation, if I'm viewing it from the voters' perspective, you're going to vote for Jarrett Allen and leave Bam off your list. You're going to leave Anthony Davis off your list. I just feel like Allen will be the odd man out. And I also think that the Cavs backsliding to 7th in defensive rating. I think they're bottom 10 since the All-Star break. They're 7th on the year now. That obviously doesn't help. And so Jarrett Allen's, he's all defense in my heart. Same way he was an all-star in my heart. He might not have actually made either team, but Cavs fans understand that he belongs in the conversation. And to be fair, a lot of national media members have given him the recognition of saying, hey, he's probably not going to make it, but he's an honorable mention. So we do love to see that. Let's head into our last topic here. And I want to say this fan base, some of the fan base, has lost their minds when it comes to Darius Garland. The takes range from somewhat reasonable to just absolute insanity. And to be honest, I think this one falls into that latter category. And I do just want to say, for all the comments that we get sometimes, don't hate the player, hate the game, okay? I know this is a little clickbaity. I know the idea of what I'm about to get into of should Darius Garland be on the bench is ludicrous. It's not worth discussing. But when you're playing the YouTube game, sometimes you got to hit on these fun topics and try and get people to look at your channel. So I think it's safe to assume that we are all out on this idea, but do the Cavs need to bench Darius Garland? And more specifically, to have some substance to this, how can the Cavs get the most out of DG during the final weeks of the season?
Oh, man. First off, let me say this. What is YouTube without a little bit of clickbait? I mean,
exactly.
you got to throw it out there. You got to reel them in somehow. That said, I mean, you just look at the Cavaliers as a unit. I'll start there, big picture. They are all over the place, especially offensively, but nobody has been struggling more so than Darius Garland. Now, pre-injury, which is a span of 20 games, he was averaging 20.7 points and 5.9 assists and shooting 47.2% from the field. Now, the three ball was still like a huge issue, 34.6% of his triples at that point. But he was buoying that. And I think this is the biggest point here, guys. He was buoying that with making a high amount of his 2-point field goals, specifically 53% of them. And one of the things that I tend to look at with what he has struggled with is driving the basketball. Driving the basketball has been the thing that has completely changed, in my opinion, with him. He was averaging 17.2 drives per game during that 20-game stretch before his jaw injury, making 3.8 of his 7.6 field goal attempts that he attempted following a drive. That's solid. That's 49.7%. But, post-injury, those numbers have completely dipped to the point where he's down to 14.2 drives per game since returning. And even worse than that, he is attempting just 4.7 field goals off of drives and completing just 42.9% of those looks. And to me, it just speaks to how timid he looks right now. And I don't think he's lost his ability to finish. I just think he's gun shy right now. I mean, after taking such a beating over the years, especially being smacked and hit and elbowed and poked in the eye. I mean, there have been so many different things that this dude has gone through. And the funny thing to me is that, and I know this is a long-winded response, a rapid-fire show, but since coming back, he's been relatively efficient when he does attack. He still made 56.4% of his shots from within 5 feet of the rim and 57.6% from within the restricted area. But the real problem area for him seems to be from within 5 to 9 feet, as he's making just 30.8% of his shots from that distance. That in addition to just not really taking shots. And here's probably the most glaring part. The thing that I see most people say is that he's not aggressive and he's only taking 13.6 shots per game during that stretch. And for me, that is a problem. I am out completely on the idea of benching Darius Garland. Let me get that out the way. But I am in on the idea of them force feeding him the ball and making him shoot, because I just think that it's mental. It's got to be something mental. I don't think he's lost his ability at all. Although 12 plus pounds lost, there's no way that does not affect your explosiveness. There's a huge correlation there. That said, you still have to have the aggressiveness and the confidence to believe in yourself enough to attack the way that you were attacking. It's the only way you're going to get back to it.
Yeah, I'm right there with what you just said there. I think if you're going to fix this, you got to just keep instilling that confidence in DG. You're not going to bench him. Okay, there's nothing to be gained from sending him to the bench. You're only going, I don't even want to entertain it. Okay, the way to fix this is clearly, listen, even throughout the season, DG has had some very good games. Just a couple weeks ago against New Orleans, he lit them up. He looked like that 2021 version of himself that everyone just wishes that would come back. We saw it not that long ago. It was right there. Now he wasn't able to maintain it. And really what it comes down to is this is all on DG. He just has to be better. He's been struggling this year, and at the end of the day, he just has to be better. The way to get him there is to encourage him to keep being aggressive, keep shooting. I appreciated against Phoenix that he was shooting the ball. I think he finished 5 of 17, and don't get me wrong, he missed a whole bunch in the third quarter that kind of tilted the game the wrong way, but I would rather see him do that than have these games where he has 8 points on 5 shot attempts. It's like, you have to keep shooting the ball if you're DG. That's what this team needs from you. And so, Corey, where are you at on all this?
I think, honestly, it's going to be an answer I don't think fans are necessarily going to love, but I think the way DG gets back on track entirely is just an off-season reset where he can kind of reframe himself. It's like, it's a combination of everything. As Max said, it's like there's definitely a mentality thing, but I think it's also in correlation with the fact that physically he's not the player he entered the season as. And when you prepare to enter the season one way and then everything kind of gets thrown with the NBA schedule of you not being able to practice and like prepare for games the way you normally would before the season starts, it changes like how he has to play on the fly. And we've seen that he's gone from being a player who was trending more aggressively towards attacking the rim to kind of shying away from it. It feels like a lot of his drives are kind of hollow in purpose now, where maybe he would be attempting more, but because he can't really kind of edge the defender out with his body the way he needs to get these layups in, that it almost feels like he has to abort to 9-1-1 passing way more often than we kind of have gotten DG, been accustomed to seeing DG do. He usually drives with a purpose. He usually finds someone if that layup's not there. But I just think it's something that's going to come with a whole new offseason where he can kind of just get back to where he was last offseason physically, and then he can kind of build his game around there. You kind of just hope that he learns from this what he's capable of doing from the perimeter, seeing as it feels like a lot of his game is coming from there now, and we've always clamored that we wished he shot more threes. I don't think we were wishing he would only shoot threes, because it kind of makes you pretty one-dimensional as a point guard, but it's unfortunate for Darius. I don't think this season has skewed my opinion of him as a player whatsoever, but at the end of the day, it's just like you can only deal with the cards you're dealt, and unfortunately for DG, the injury card just is something that's always going to be around, not even in like the sense that he's injury prone. He's prone to getting hit is all that it really comes down to.
There are no limits to the horrors that NBA players will impose on DG's face. I mean, he has been hit on every part of his face, broken jaw, pokes his eye, just sometimes it's friendly fire. I mean, it's just crazy what he has been throughout, really since Gary Trent Jr. first hit him.
You don't need to bring up that day.
That's when it all started. But yeah, I mean, I think the real bounce back does come in the offseason when he has time to regain that muscle that he put on. I mean, that was that big emphasis of the summer, was getting stronger, and obviously he loses that. I hope that as the schedule slows down a little bit and we get to kind of that little break you get before the playoffs start, and then, no more back-to-backs in the playoffs, it offers a little bit of a reset for DG to get himself back under control. And again, I think a lot of it is mentality. So getting some rest, getting that mental reset could really help. And you just have to hope he can get hot at the right time, because we've seen him do it this season. And that's what a lot of NBA playoff basketball comes down to, is you got to just hit your stride at the right moment. And DG has certainly not hit his stride yet this season. If he hits it, it's yet to be seen, but hopefully it's on the horizon. The
one good thing that I can say about Darius right now is that even with the over-reliance on the three-point shot, he is starting to shoot the ball better. 37.1% since returning from that broken jaw, and he is dishing out 7 assists and turned the ball over less as well. I mean, 2.6 assists since return, 2.6 turnovers rather since returning. We know how big of an issue that was to begin the year.
Yeah, he was having, I think it was just a little bit better than his rookie season in terms of his assist to turnover ratio, which his rookie season was abysmal in that department. So he's having one of the worst assist to turnover ratios to start the year. I pulled it up. Now he has improved to 45th out of 114 players with a certain usage rate. I think it was above 20%, which it's above average. He's made it into the top 50, which compared to where he was, I didn't find exactly where he was to start, but I would imagine he was well in the back half there. And so he has really cleaned that up. He has been dishing the ball. He's still surgical in the pick and roll. Some of his deliveries to Allen have just been so beautiful. It's just, he hasn't been able to score. And that also compounds his ability to hit the big men when he's not a threat to shoot at the rim. You've seen teams just kind of drop back and be like, well, go ahead, shoot it. And he doesn't have the confidence to do it. I think there was a play against Denver. I think it was KCP was the backside. He was the only one protecting the rim. And DG, rather than going up with a layup, tries to lob it to Allen. And KCP is like, okay, I'll just stay back here. And, oh, you threw it right to me? Thank you. And it's really just, that's the perfect image of DG's season inside of the paint, I think. That being too timid to just go up against someone who is not a rim protector. That's going to do it for this episode of In or Out. Thank you again to Mack and Corey for joining me. I will have links in the description for both of them. And with all that being said, go Cavs.
I agree. Go Cavs. Jackson, enjoy DC.